we're doing okay. It's week 6.
I hear ya. I'm gonna try to be on mute for most of the time in case you guys can hear the screaming toddler in the background. So
Yeah.
if you see me leave in a rush, you'll know why.
Yeah, it's okay. We'll be enabling the we're basically disabling the ability for people to unmute themselves once the thing starts, so that if you want to say something, just raise your hand. Then that way we can get everyone in orderly fashion. So we'll give it a couple more minutes for people to trickle in. Yeah, the general town hall format will be basically sort of like a bit more interactive than the previous one, because we'll leave open extra time for professors to ask students questions. And if so for we have like, I think, like 4 topics on the agenda this town hall. And yeah, and also just to let everyone who's coming in, this town hall will be recorded. So if you want, well, like once you start recording, if you want to, you can turn off your video or not. It's up to you. And we'll start at 4:05. That's the current plan right now. Are we let everyone trickle in? Okay, so yeah, maybe we'll give it a couple more minutes. So how's everyone doing right now? Doing all right? Week 6.
Hopefully this will be the last quarter where we're online. Hopefully fall's looking good.
Okay. Okay, so for everyone who just joined, we'll be starting in maybe like 2 minutes, around 4 or 5. So, and then I'll give a brief lowdown on what's going to happen in the town hall, and then we'll get started. Hi everyone, we'll be starting in about a minute. And also just to let everyone know, this town hall will be recorded. If you want to turn on or off your video, feel free to do so. Okay, so it's 4:05. We'll get started at the town hall. Welcome everyone. So like the moderators for this town hall will be me, Joseph, and Victor Sanchez. And just another reminder, this town hall will be recorded. So if you want to review anything after this town hall has ended, you can. So thank you to everyone who filled in the survey. So we actually put out another survey, and we had about 45 responses this time. And roughly we have 21 Nano students responding and roughly 23 Chemie students responding. And we had about quite an even spread of people from all years pitching in and about their opinions about the department and various top issues at hand. So the itinerary will go like this. So we are planning to talk a lot about teaching and student success in remote learning. And then we'll talk about the Nano-centric curriculum and like any issues pertaining to that. And then we'll get started about career guidance and research opportunities. And then we'll also talk about computational classes. And we will then move on to an open floor for any other questions, outstanding questions at the end. And the town hall will end at 5:30. And also, we are planning to integrate a bit more interactivity into this town hall. So basically at the end of each like topic, if the professors have like specific like questions they would like to ask the students and they would like to get like direct feedback from them right now, feel free to just like once the student questions have been like addressed, we can move on to that for each topic at hand. And then if if the questions you want to ask don't exactly fit into these like 4 topics, you can always ask it during the open floor. So the current format for this town hall is this. We will disable the ability for people to just unmute themselves. If you would like to unmute yourself, use the raise hand function in Zoom, and then we'll get to everyone in order. So the first section, which is teaching and student success in remote learning, is actually going to be handled by Victor. So Victor, I'll hand it over to you.
Hi everyone, I'll just briefly introduce myself. My name is Victor Sanchez. I'm a third-year chemical engineering major, and I'm the department chair for AIChE. So I'll be moderating the first 2 sections of this town hall, starting with teaching and student success in remote learning. So we can move on to the next slide. So these figures are sort of representing the student opinions on remote learning in general. With the questions, I feel capable of succeeding in a remote learning environment. I believe courses are being conducted as best as possible given the current circumstances of the pandemic. I feel the resources to assist in my learning are just as accessible virtually as they were in person. And lastly, I feel virtual lab classes are just as effective as in-person lab courses. So I'll give faculty a brief moment to sort of take in these results and sort of observe. And then, okay, I think we can move on to the next slide. And then, so these figures represent student opinions on transitioning back into in-person learning, with the questions being, I believe faculty have been understanding of the challenges presented by remote learning. I feel prepared for transitioning back into in-person learning. And lastly, I believe there are some elements of online education that would be effective if used after your return to in-person learning. So looking to the last one, there's sort of a pretty strong skew towards agree and strongly agree. And with the first one as well, there's pretty strong opinions for agree and strongly agree. And then for the I feel prepared for a transition back to in-person learning, the results are very conflicted. There's a lot of mixed responses. And I think now we can move on to the comments. So for this slide, we kind of summed up the comments and questions that a lot of people had with regards to remote learning. A lot of the comments had to do with the value there was in online office hours and recorded lectures, because students really liked the ability to be able to go back and watch lectures over and over again, or however many times they wanted. And there was one comment that mentioned that they enjoyed that professors had been more lenient with open note testing during the pandemic because it allowed students to use their own personal resources, which they believed was conducive to learning. And also there are a few comments about being worried going back to in-person learning because there are some students who arrived to UCSD when it was virtual, so they had never gotten used to in-person learning. So they're concerned about that transition back. So this kind of leads us to a few talking points, with the first question being, what aspects of remote teaching do professors plan to continue using when we are back in person? So for the faculty, feel free to raise your hand, and then Joseph will unmute you so you can speak. Go ahead, Professor Drews.
Hey, everybody. Dr. Drews, if you don't know who I am. I've talked to a couple of different folks over in chemistry and mechanical engineering. And one thing that comes up a lot is using, actually it was pointed out right here as the second one, office hours online. If not completely replacing in-person office hours, I don't think anybody has talked about that yet in the teaching community in those departments. But certainly using online office hours as an addition to the usual office hours system. It seems like it goes really well with aiding students in the different environments that you might be trying to learn in. So from what I've heard, online office hours is probably going to stick around, but naturally that would be sort of professor dependent. I haven't heard much about continuing the recording. I don't think that will change too much from the way that podcasts are usually collected. So for anybody that has been at UCSD before, most courses are podcasts. So the professor puts a little mic on and it just records their audio as they go along. It's somewhat more rare to have a class that actually has video or live notes or something like that. My guess is that won't be too much different than what it used to be before. But I could be entirely wrong there. That part is just my guess. I haven't heard that from anyone else.
Thank you, Professor. Would anybody else want to provide their input? Go ahead, Professor Tao.
Hi, everybody. Andrea Tao. Just to, I guess, reiterate what Dr. Drews pointed out, I think it'll be very instructor dependent as to what aspects of remote teaching an instructor will decide to use. I don't think there's necessarily going to be uniformity across a given department's courses. I do, however, think that more instructors will make use of Canvas, so we'll make use of that common platform. I know that my TAs in previous courses have really enjoyed using Gradescope to grade problem sets rather than having to deal with paper problem sets. And so I think that's probably one area that at least I know myself personally, I will probably keep. And so I think probably most instructors will keep using the Canvas platform. But you guys know that most of the UCSD podcasts are, I don't think they're integrated with the Canvas platform. So that might be something to bring up actually with Campus ITS to see if there can be better integration the way there is with the Zoom and Canvas right now.
Thank you, Professor. And then Professor Chen, go ahead.
Hi, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Xiaochen Chen. I'm the department chair. So at the university level, we are discussing the way to improve our teaching, for the fall. If this is in person, likely, and then we'll go back to the in-person classes, unless you are a international student, you have a visa issue and other specific issues. So we understand that podcast is different from the Zoom meeting. There you can see all the recorded videos. The university is looking at possible ways of improving that kind of IT support. So you could, it's possible that we could see the record in terms of voice like a podcast, but also maybe the blackboard writing, so or some sort of smart whiteboard writing. It's in the process, but the goal is to really to help the student when we make transition back to in-person. That's all.
Thank you, Professor. And then if there's no more input on that question, we did want to move on to the next question for this section. There was also some comments about the lack of engagement that comes with the virtual learning. And we wanted to pose the question to faculty, what is being done to promote engagement within the classroom?
I can start.
Go
okay.
ahead, Xiaochen.
I guess when we go back to the classroom, there's multiple ways of promoting engagement. Asking questions, answering questions, some quick quiz on site, and then a small group discussion. Those kind of things. That has been done before, and I think if student likes those, we definitely can continue these because there's no reason we cannot do that in the classroom. The issue is whether the classroom is still the same size with the same number of students. That we don't know yet, because if there's a like 300 students class, what is the social distance rule? Because we don't know really at this moment. So likely by July 1st, sometime like that, we could know better about some of these plans.
Thank you, Professor. And then Professor Tao, did you want to?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think there has been discussion amongst instructors, at least within Jacobs School, about a way to implement Zoom polls. So, in I think some of the larger courses, especially introductory chemistry, people kind of use clickers, and that's kind of the equivalent of implementing simple Zoom polls during remote learning. And so there's been talk of how do we retain the engagement that we get with a Zoom poll, but in an in-person classroom. And so some people are thinking about actually still using Zoom or other kind of polling software instead of using clickers within the classroom. So I think it's still kind of open as to how we actually promote that kind of engagement, but that is something that we're actively trying to figure out, like a best practice for students to participate in like real-time polls and quizzes like that.
Thank you, Professor. Is there any other faculty members that wanted Dr. Juice?
Yeah, I was scrunching up my eyes trying to figure out how to communicate this, but I guess if you're thinking about the engagement that we have with the classroom right now in remote learning has also been balanced by a lot of effort on the part of the faculty to essentially teach the class in two ways simultaneously, right? For all of the students who can take it sort of in the normal route, in the sense of showing up to a Zoom meeting and participating in class, but also all of that overhead that the faculty have to spend time doing to maintain that entire out-of-person class, the recordings of the lectures and the posting of the notes, and then, you know, having a backup plan for essentially allowing a student to stop in the middle of a course and miss 20 to 25% of it if they have to leave because they're sick or something like that. So it's maybe not promoting engagement, but I would anticipate that a lot of classes would not have the same level of accommodations when we go back to fully in-person teaching, not in a way to like punish a student or try to make them like, oh, you got to show up now because everybody is in person, but because of the reasons that we've already mentioned, which is a lot of the resources will be used depending on what that professor wants to do, right? Whether they record it, whether that technology is available or not. So that type of engagement, you may see it, you may feel a shift in that, in the way that the course is actually administered. And I think that's the faculty shifting their focus from what they're doing now to closer to the way that we used to do it when it was in person.
Thank you, Professor. And if there's no more input for that question, we did want to, at the end of each section, we did want to sort of flip the questioning and ask professors and faculty if there was any questions they wanted to pose to the audience, to the students here in attendance. Professor Tao? Oops. Sorry, I muted you 1 second. There you go.
Okay. Yeah, I actually had a question for the students about academic integrity, which is something that I think at the beginning of the pandemic and throughout the remote teaching experience, and we as faculty have been consistently worried with how do we keep, you know, a rigorous classroom environment? How do we keep student learning up? And part of that has been worrying about how students are handling things like take-home quizzes and take-home exams, and whether you guys feel that remote learning has impeded academic integrity or promoted cheating or done the opposite in you know, your personal experiences over the past year. Be curious to hear.
Aiden?
Hey everyone, for those of you who might not know me, I'm Aiden and I'm a senior that's graduating this year. So from my end of things, I personally, in the classes that I've taken, have not seen or heard of an issue about academic integrity. However, that said, I think it also sort of depends upon the questions that are at play, because I could see for some classes like multiple choice questions and that kind of thing are much harder, I think, for professors, from what I've heard, to keep an eye on in terms of integrity, whereas more essay-based questions, although they tie up a lot more TA time, it's a little more difficult for people to cheat on them, just because it's so obvious when people try to cheat on essay questions. But that's just like sort of the vibe that I've heard.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wanted to provide their input, or did the professor want to respond to that comment? Were there any other questions that professors also wanted to ask? Professor Chen?
Yeah, I'm curious. So for the fall, when we do this in-person teaching, I wonder if there's any student who are in the US, whether it's a California student or out-of-state student, any person who do not plan to come back, or is there any like specific concern of coming back?
Do we have anyone in the audience that wanted to respond to Professor Chen's question? Emily?
I'll respond, but I think most people are coming back to San Diego, although I would say there has been like some concern with like how things are going to transition to in-person because we still want to uphold like safety guidelines and we're not sure like how gathering is going to continue to be like implemented in fall quarter and stuff. So there is definitely some concerns and I would love to see like kind of like more hybrid stuff for fall quarter, but that's just my opinion.
And I think we can also allow Ryan to provide his input.
Yeah, I think that's one of my concerns as well, because I think while they say it'll be in person and there will be maybe social distancing, a concern of mine would be that, okay, a lot of different people will be going through the same classroom in one day. And that's something I'm still a little concerned about as a student.
Okay. Did any professors want to respond to sort of the comment of like what the transition process is going to look like when we get back to in-person classes? Is it going to be completely back to normal, or is there going to be sort of a process of easing back into the back to normal? Professor Chen?
The answer is we don't know yet. I was told that by July 1st, there is going to be some sort of announcement. But the general rule is that you probably heard from email from Chancellor that all UC faculty, staff, and students are required to take the vaccine, unless there are any specific, individual reason for not doing so. So if everybody is vaccinated, I think the possibility of going back to normal like before for in-person teaching is very, very high. And the reason I ask you, if this, so we expect, in other words, we would expect everybody will come back, whether you are from out of state or you are in state. Unless you are an international student, you don't have visa and other issues. So, and the reason also, I asked the question is, if there's the majority of students are coming back, then we can prepare better for the in-person classes. How many? How to do it, right? And should we still do, should we do remote? Should we do hybrid, or should we do complete in person? So yeah, that's a message I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. And then if there are no more questions, or Dr. Drews, did you have your hand raised, or?
Yeah, as just one additional question, I see the quote here, or the concern. I'm worried that the transition back to in-person learning will be difficult because we haven't experienced college in an in-person experience. On the one hand, I wouldn't fret too much about it, because remember, every freshman class that comes in is experiencing college learning for the very first time. So it's, I think, entirely natural to be a little bit apprehensive about a new learning environment that you've never encountered before. But as the question that I would pose to anybody who maybe can either think about what that might be like, maybe you've already been in person and now you're remote and you can try to put yourself in the shoes of somebody that's coming back, or anybody who is already here but has only been remote and hasn't been there in person. What in particular do you think that we could do that would help that kind of a transition?
Are there any members of the audience that want to respond to Professor Drew's question? Emily?
Yeah, I guess just like one thing from like online to in person that might be a big shocker to like freshmen who haven't experienced it is like the leniency that comes with a lot of online teaching and like being more understanding when student issues come up. Maybe next quarter, like in the fall when freshmen are incoming for the first time, maybe continuing being like more understanding of students would be very much appreciated as they're like coming to this new environment and trying to transition to being at home for an entire year and then being in person again.
Thank you, Emily. And then Professor Drews, did you still have your hand raised or? No, okay. Okay, so, well, thank you everyone for their questions and their input. I think we are good to move on to the next section of the town hall, which is Nano and SENG curriculum. And we'll go ahead and start with these two pie charts. So these focus on student opinions on major difficulty. These are for the SENG courses and Nano courses. The Nano courses seem to be pretty mixed and conflicted, the SENG courses as well. And we can go and move on to the next slide. And then these are student opinions on major preparation. So for the top row, these are responses by SENG students for the questions of, I believe the material learned in these courses prepares me well for industry. And I believe the material learned in these courses prepares me well for graduate school. So both of these figures seem to lean pretty well towards the agree side or strongly agree. And for Nano students in the bottom row, they were posed the same question. And the results seem to be a little more conflicted for industry and then pretty strong towards the agree side for graduate school. So we can go and move on to the next slide, which is student opinions on major difficulty and preparation. Sort of a continuation of the last slide. But we also pose the questions, I find it easy to retain the information learned in these courses, and I believe the prerequisites are adequate for these courses. For the prerequisites for both majors, they seem to lean pretty heavily towards the agree side. And for the ability to retain this information learned in these courses, the percentage majors, it seemed to be majority agree with a few portion of students in the minority, in the disagree minority. And the opinions of the Nano students on this question seem to be a little bit more conflicted and mixed. And we can go and move on to the next slide. Okay, so now we'll move on to the comments and questions slide. A lot of these questions, a lot of these comments seem to revolve around MA 170, which seems to be a pretty common topic among SENG majors, where they feel unprepared for the class and they wish there was a sort of an equivalent for SENG majors, and that there is a knowledge gap between the MAE and non-MAE students when they enter this course. And additionally, there's some comments on the Nano program preparing the students for only a specific sector of the industry when they exit university. And there was also a few comments about wanting to learn more about, to try and build a stronger foundation in chemistry in general for chemical engineers as well as nano engineers. They feel that they wanted something similar to an OChem seminar to give them a better background in this subject. So this kind of leads me into this sort of broader question of, for faculty, of, are there any plans in the near future for any adjustments to the Nano or SENG curriculum? And also feel free to comment on any of the figures that we showed before. If you want us to go back to them, we can do that as well. Just feel free to raise your hand and then we can unmute you. Starting with Professor Drews.
Sorry, as soon as I raised my hand, a jet flew by outside, so I hope that's not too loud on any of your speakers. I'll address MAE 170 in about the same way that I did in our last town hall, which is we have a plan for a replacement for where it will go in the curriculum and where it will physically take place. Almost all course development in terms of new courses like that, especially lab courses, has essentially been paused during the pandemic. I mean, most of us can't actually get back into the lab to set it up so that you could get back into the lab. And most faculty aren't going to design an entirely new course that would be done remotely only to have to go in and redesign it afterwards. So we hear you. We haven't changed our opinion at all. It's still our intent to replace it. We didn't plan on a pandemic, but I don't think anybody did. But yeah, we hear you, and we do plan to replace it. I know that's not much comfort for the folks who are in it currently, but that's the best that I can tell you about here. As far as the area of chemistry, that was actually done to help us. I think maybe Carla could help remind me of exactly how that went. But it used to be 5 chemistries that you had to take. And then I can't remember exactly why, and maybe Carla, you could jump in here. But we ended up moving it down to 3, I think because there was a push from someone, I don't know who, that said we have to reduce the number of credits for your degree. And part of that cut was made to chemistry.
Thank you, Professor. And now we will move on to Professor Tao.
Yeah, so I can actually provide a follow-up comment to the chemical engineering chemistry requirement. The advanced chemistry electives were cut down from 5 to 3 courses. I think that was done 2 years ago and implemented maybe a year and a half ago. And that was to decrease the time to degree, especially for transfer students coming into the major. I mean, you guys have seen how condensed a 2 and 3 year schedule for engineering majors looks like. And so that is exactly why the chemistry electives were cut. That doesn't mean that you can't take more chemistry electives if you want, as the quote says, but the reason why they were cut was to decrease the time to degree for students. And then I can address the comments about the nanoengineering curriculum as well. So most of you know, we're kind of in the midst of making a pretty big transition in the nanoengineering major from, you've probably heard us call it like the old catalog versus the new catalog. So incoming freshmen this year are on this new nanoengineering catalog where the students are taking nanoengineering courses earlier. So courses like Nano 101, which used to be a sophomore level course or second year course, is now offered in year 1. And core courses like Nano 102 and 104 have been shifted to the second year or sophomore year. And courses like Nano 103, which in previous town hall meetings and from feedback from the students, people have said that it's a little bit redundant. That material is going to be taught, or some of the relevant material is going to be taught in Nano 102, and Nano 103 will be an elective. So there's kind of this big shift that's already underway where we're moving a lot of the courses 1 year up in the curriculum. And that's really so that by the time you get to your senior year and you're taking the capstone design course, you already have all of those core classes under your belt, including the nano manufacturing courses, including the courses that right now are being taught as like fourth year courses. So like Aaron said, unfortunately it doesn't affect those of you who are in the major right now as, upperclassmen, but there are these changes that are kind of being implemented right now with our incoming freshman class. And there are also labs for every year that are now coupled to courses taught in each of the 4 years. So I think this year we were supposed to teach a new class called Nano 20L, which would have been like a chemistry lab coupled with Nano 102. But unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we weren't able to offer that this year. The the other main thing that I'll mention is that in upcoming years, so again, starting with the students who have entered the nanoengineering major this year, the senior design course is going to be a truly open-ended course, meaning both quarters are going to involve open-ended design, and all of the lab modules that are being taught in 120A right now, which is kind of like the first quarter of the design course, those are all being shifted to this big lab class called Nano 115L in the third year. So there's going to be this third year lab that is going to be like the nanoengineering lab, where you guys will actually go through the modules, so that by the time you get to your last year in your major, you'll already have some knowledge of those nanoengineering tools, and you'll truly be able to kind of work on an open-ended design project in your team for the entirety of 2 quarters. So hopefully, I know that was a lot, but hopefully you get the picture. We're in the midst of a big change.
Thank you, Professor. If there are no more questions or responses from faculty, we did want to do something similar to what we did for the last section, where we open up the floor for faculty to ask questions to students about anything regarding the Nano or SENG curriculum or any concerns students might have. So feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions or comments. If not, we can also move on to the next section of the town hall. That works too. And for these next 2 sections, I will pass it off to Joseph, and he will take it from here.
Hi everyone, I'm Joseph. I'm the NETS department chair, so I'll get started on career guidance and research opportunities. So we actually did the survey and asked about whether nano and chemistry students felt that the coursework was preparing them sufficiently for their future career, and whether the major they're currently taking aligns with their future aspirations. For the most part, majority agree with both questions. And we also asked students about their difficulties in finding internships and research opportunities, and what like the main factors that contribute to it. And we noticed that a very key factor is the lack of relevant experience. That seems to be the common trend. But on average, it seems that more people have found research opportunities, but in both cases, you can see that it's lack of relevant experience, low GPA, and there's some would say that they don't have time. So there are a bunch of questions. This is quite a heavy topic, but basically, the first question sort of is basically, how can students be more competitive for research positions and internships despite having a perceived lack of experience? Feel free to raise your hand if you have a response. Professor Juice? Oops, sorry. Just try again.
So that's what that feels like.
Yeah.
The part I would address here is the feeling that the research is quite detached from the curriculum you're taught. That's not unusual for chemical engineers, because the types of material that you're taught at the undergraduate level, you can think of it as we're teaching you how to solve the problems for which we already know the solutions. When you transition into a research environment, I would assume this is quite similar for most degrees, but I'm only experienced in chemical engineering. The types of questions that you're asking need a different set of tools to solve them. And so I wouldn't expect a lot of research in chemical engineering these days to be on the same types of equipment that you're learning about at the undergraduate level. The link between them is usually in your 101 series. So things like momentum heat and mass transfer show up in lots of different areas of research. And so you can see some links in there for different research opportunities that might come along. But I would not at all be surprised if none of it feels like the undergraduate level, because those are kind of solved problems. And so there's not a lot of active research in those fields. There are at some other specialty universities where, you know, they're focused on gas phase catalysis or something like that. So you might see it over there. But I would say at the majority of universities, the research field of chemical engineering doesn't look like the undergraduate level chemical engineering. That's not just here, that's the way that the program in general has evolved. That's kind of normal to see that discrepancy. I also wouldn't let that stop you from joining a group that is not directly working on something that you've seen at the chemical engineering undergraduate level. That doesn't mean that there's not a way for you to certainly contribute, but in a greater sense, learn a lot from that research experience, because they're going to teach you problem solving skills that are transferable to lots of different areas.
Thank you, Professor Drews. Does anyone else have comments on the first question? If anyone else doesn't really have a comment on the first question, we can move on to the second one. So the second one is sort of like a spin-off on the issue of like lacking relevant experience. So there are classes in, I think, MAE and ECE where they actually integrate like certification lessons into their elective courses, and you can take one of these courses and you come out with actual certification that companies do look for. So I was just wondering if the nanoengineering department would be considering adding any such certification classes and maybe integrating it either into your curriculum or into like elective classes. Professor Tao?
Yeah, I don't think we've had a recent discussion on certification classes. I know that we have offered opportunities for gaining certification in specific programs. I think Dr. Vecchio did this a few years ago, where I think it was over winter break. There were like maybe 2 or 3 days where it was seminars that were focused not on LabVIEW, was it CalFAD? But on a particular material software where you could earn your certification. And I know in the past we've discussed this, but it hasn't really come up again. So if that's something that is of interest to students, I think that's certainly something that we can put on the table, whether or not it's formally integrated into one of the lab classes or whether we can offer it as like an extracurricular opportunity. I think either of those, you know, might add to the student experience. And so, you know, I think that's definitely something that we can discuss as a faculty, as a department, and figure out how to do that.
Thank you, Professor Tao. Does anyone else have comments on this question? Professor?
Thank you. I think, you know, the other way to learn these skills is through research labs. So for instance, in my own lab, we do 3D printing, bioprinting, and the undergrads often help with SolidWorks or Photoshops, and then, you know, then we can print the structure. So it's a very natural process rather than just a specific certification class. I think many labs have instrument that requires the use of LabVIEW. So I think that once you have, you know, opportunity working in the lab, you probably will be exposed to these tools. Going back to the first question, I missed that. You know, how can we still be more competitive for research position, internship position? I would say that when first I think from research position perspective, I don't expect a student to be really experienced when they start in my lab, because it just came out of high school. What do we expect you now? But I think one important factor I look at is your GPA. If a GPA is like 2.5 or below that, I would not suggest a student to go to the lab, because you have to spend time working on your courses, because coming to the lab would take you a lot of time if you want to really to be involved. So then that will make your grade even worse. So I would suggest that the student in situation like that would take more time, focus on the curriculum in the courses. But experience-wise, no, I don't think we really look at that experience as a factor. I think same thing for internship. A lot of time people look at your personal contribute. When you do the interview, you talk to people, you look at this person and feel it will be a good team. So more about like a personnel build-up rather than some specific experience, because same thing, company want to train the student when they try to take you, because you're a college student, you're supposed to learn stuff. So when you show that you are eager to learn, in terms of personal impression, I think those are more important.
Thank you, Professor Chen. Does anyone else have any further comment on this?
Oh, I don't think I ended up getting muted again. So is it okay if I just go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I think another key thing that sometimes gets lost in the hustle of trying to, keep up your GPA, maintain a job, or, pay your tuition amongst all the other responsibilities that students have, is that it's good to look for these experiences really early within your college tenure. So, if I look up internship opportunities at materials type companies like something like 3M, usually those internship positions are available starting after your freshman year. And so I think the key thing is to start looking early on, even if you don't have experience. It's something that, you do have to work on building up, starting from day one, if possible. So, I would say that just a word of advice is to look for as many opportunities as possible and look for them early on, starting off in your first year at UCSD. Don't wait until you're ready to find a job and you're ready to graduate to look for those kinds of opportunities.
Thank you, Professor Tao. I just would like to point out a comment by Professor Serbely. So he says that even if you can't get certificates, gaining some experience in computer software and simulation tools, like for example, via online resources or courses, will be valuable for being more competitive. And a lot of computer-based programs have a lot of great tutorials and test modules. So this is for those that are listening to the recording back at home. Okay, does anyone else have any further comment on the first two questions? If not, I will move on to question 3. So question 3 is more of a, because we actually received a lot of comments about how they feel like sometimes the professors they just feel like they don't know that much about the research area that they're going into. And then there's also like this fear of talking about research interests that the professor might not necessarily be like that knowledgeable of, or like research that's not necessarily a field, and like whether students should be comfortable talking to professors about like advice regarding these kind of topics that are not necessarily in their area of expertise. So I'll leave this open to the professors. Professor Chen?
I would say I don't mind student talking to me about something else, that's not necessarily my expertise area. For instance, graduate school, service in the society, and in my case also, I had experience with the Fed. I was a program manager at the National Science Foundation, so I don't mind talking about this outside outside the research areas. I think a student probably don't be shy. Just knock on the door if the professor is there, or more politely, send an email in case the email didn't get replied. Just keep trying. I think you will find someone who can talk to you. It's just I think I look at student last year. She just keeps sending me emails, and eventually, because of COVID, I really couldn't take students, new students last year. But now when things are relaxed, then I just accept her into a lab. So just being consistent would make it happen. So.
Thank you, Professor Chen. Professor Tao, you have the floor.
Yeah, I think an important thing to remember is that professors are people too. So, I mean, if you want to talk to us about our own personal experiences, most of us are pretty happy to share those with students, but it has to be at kind of the right time. So not when we're like frantically working on a proposal or trying to get ready for class, but yeah, if you send us an email or come to office hours and you can read the room and get a sense for whether or not it's like an appropriate time to bring up those kinds of questions. I think most of us are absolutely happy to talk about things outside of our direct research expertise, whether or not it's advice on how to get a job or how to get an internship, or our own personal experiences in engineering and science. So yeah, just remember that we're people too. So approach us how you would a normal person.
Thank you, Professor Tao. Does anyone else have any comment on this question or any of the previous questions? If not, I will move this. I'll turn this around on the professors. So like professors, if you have any questions you want to ask students regarding basically like career guidance and research opportunities, feel free to let me know. Professor Tao?
Yeah, I'm curious if there are any success stories that, for those of you who are, around right now in Zoom land, would care to share with the rest of us in terms of getting an internship or, getting a job offer that might be helpful for your fellow peers who may be struggling or don't know where to begin.
Aiden?
So I currently have two different things that I've worked on. I've done work for the Department of Defense, and I've also been accepted to a PhD program. And in both cases, for me, being able to acquire like a professional network through either like hackathons, various projects that I've worked on in classes or with other professors has been like a big part of it, because usually once you start building out a network, people in it can point you to other people who can then usually point you to people that are know of different opportunities. So in my case, a friend of mine in TESC let me know about this thing that was being run by the DoD, and that's how I got that internship. And that was just because I had done an event with that person from Task. And so the moral of the story, if you will, is be good at building your contact network from as soon as you like set foot into any in-person experience. I mean, usually people are quite willing to form LinkedIn connections with you, just like based on a friendly conversation.
Thank you, right? Thank you, Aidan, for the for comments. Anyone else wants to respond to Professor Tao's Emily?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say like getting internships is definitely really hard, especially when you have no experience, but also like for like college student internships, a lot of them are also looking for people who are just enthusiastic and willing to learn. So be sure to like, if you don't have that experience, it's important to express that you are like, that's why you're applying to this job and show that you're very interested and enthusiastic. I know we had like our NETS internship panel yesterday. So if you're looking for more student advice on getting internships and stuff, that was also recorded. So yeah.
Ryan?
Yeah, I think, well, yeah, going back to the panel, I think I do see a lot of people who are on that panel or in NETS that got an internship. I think one of the aspects that got them internships was being able to turn their own research experience into something where they can like tell a story to industry or employers. So I think a lot of it is where we kind of think, oh, industry and academia are two separate things. But one thing I noted that like a couple of my friends mentioned was that they have to mention that, oh, my willingness to learn in a lab and willingness to pick up new skills really encouraged the person I was talking to hire me. So showing that, I think Dr. Chen said that are along the lines of, oh, internships shouldn't have a lot of experience and they just want them to learn. And similarly, I think it's pretty similar between labs and internships in that regard.
Emily?
Yeah, I'd also like to add like also just applying to as many places as you can and applying more than once to even companies that you're really interested in. Like I just got my internship at the Aerospace Corporation and I got rejected from them like 3 times the same like application season, but then I finally got offered a position. So even if you get rejected, keep applying.
So does anyone else have any further comment on Professor Tao's question? If not, then we'll move on. Does there any other questions the professors would like to ask? We still have a bit more time for this section. If not, then what we'll do now is we'll actually move on to like the next section, which is the last section of the town hall, which is on computational classes. So there has been a lot of questions about like computational classes over the span of like the past few town halls. So this merits its own section so that we can address it. So basically, during the survey we asked like both SEND students and Nano students on whether they felt the current like course offerings was sufficient for their future aspirations. And basically, the SEND and Nano students felt that SEND 15, Nano 15 was not necessarily sufficient. Although I think for SEND 15, a lot more chemical engineering students felt that it was good enough. And there is also we also asked whether they felt that the course offerings for Nano and SEND, whether those were enough for like their future aspirations. And a majority of Nano students said that it was not enough, and it's split down the middle for the SEND students. And but when we ask them about like whether they find computational skills important, like both unanimously basically agree that it's a very important skill. And just to give a bit of context, we also did ask them like what kind of programming languages they know. And for the most part, everyone of course said they did MATLAB because everyone did Nano 15, Sense 15. But there's a small subset that also picked up Python, and there's like a couple that did other languages like C++ and Java. So this section basically will move on to talk about basically how is the nano engineering department going to handle student demand for more advanced computational classes for both nano and sense majors. Some student comments basically talk about how like other classes like MAE 107, for example, which covers numerical methods for computation, looks useful. And there's also a comment by a nano engineering major about how they noticed that the Sench classes have much more MATLAB integration into the core classes compared to the nano students. So if any professors would like to talk about it, comment on it. Professor Drews?
Yeah, I can address the point. Is it purposeful that Sench majors seem to have more MATLAB integrated into their curriculum? I don't know if it's on purpose that it's more MATLAB in Sench than it is in Nano, but it is on purpose that MATLAB is integrated into many of the Sench courses. Traditionally, MATLAB has been used in our controls course because of its Simulink capabilities. So that's widely used in a lot of different chemical engineering programs. For our department in particular, since we teach MATLAB at the freshman level for most cases, we have, as faculty, have kind of informally agreed that we should try to practice that in the majority of the classes, because that's a long time to go from first quarter freshman all the way up to fall quarter senior and never see MATLAB in between. So whenever we have an opportunity to use MATLAB in our courses, we try to make use of it. Even if we don't have a particular reason for it, we might ask you to do it just to brush up on it so that you don't lose that information. It's a language like any others. The MAE 107 course, I'm curious, what language do they use in their computational course?
MAE 107 actually is not exact. I think they use MATLAB or something, but I think the focus was more on like they learn like advanced numerical methods for like actually like how to calculate more complex and solve more complex equations using a programming language rather than like teaching the programming language itself.
Yeah, so that's roughly what I got from the syllabus. I was able to quickly Google, but I think it was from 2010. So they also mentioned Fortran, so I didn't know if you guys still used Fortran in there, which is a great language, by the way. But I would just, as a general comment to anybody taking our MATLAB courses, with the single exception of Simulink, which is specific to MATLAB, I would try to keep in mind that we're not really trying to teach you how to do MATLAB. We're using it as a platform to try to teach you how to do things like solve systems of equations or solve differential equations, a lot of which will be the same regardless of what language you use it in. We use MATLAB and Sench because it's, like I said, traditionally used in that senior course, so we pick one and stick with it. But we really do take a similar view of MATLAB. It's a convenient platform to overcome a lot of the headaches with stuff like C and C++, but that's roughly the view that we take it as well.
Thank you, Professor Drews. Does anyone have any further comment on this? Professor Yang?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah. I just checked then to the MAE 107. Actually, in the MAE department, they also offer the MAE 8. So MAE8 is called the MATLAB programming for the engineering analysis. So this is basically is equivalent to the Nano 15. So besides the Nano MAE8, so they also offer the MAE 107. So 107 are such that from the Google it said is a computational method in the engineering. So basically then the MAE is another computational class built on the MAE8. So in our department, so we only offered the Nano 15 and chemical engineering 15. So which means we do not have another computational class built on this Nano 15. But as Dr. Juice said, we try to encourage the students to use this what they have learned in other class. For example, in the class crystallography of this class, so all the computational work so are being done using the MATLAB in the class. So I'm teaching now. So I just think that is the another reason for the MATLAB Nano 15. So some students find it's not useful in the major. Probably that is because too many tools, like the Python tools or the mathematics or other online tools. So and because another reason I want to point that why we do not you have this feeling, because the simple is we only have the one quarter is 10 weeks. 10 weeks to offer one computational class is not enough at all, actually. For example, from my previous experience in the Nano 15, so when we have the past the 6 or the 5 weeks on the very basics knowledge of this MATLAB, then it's nearly over. Right? So and compared to the semester, which has around 15 weeks. So if we really want to have very solid computational, so I think it might be a good idea. That's my opinion. Okay, to have another computer class, or we need to use this class in other use the skills you have learned in other class. So one example is on the one I'm teaching now is the Nano 106. So all the computational work are built on the MATLAB. Without that, the usage is not possible to finish those work. Also, another comment is that actually it also in the previous the Townhall, so some students proposed to use to learn the Python. That's a good idea, but for the college students, I think for the students, we probably need to understand better. So what's the difference between the MATLAB and the Python? So, to me, in my research, I used the Python. Actually, I used the Python much more than the MATLAB. The reason because I use the Linux operating system. So and all the work on the supercomputer. So we need to do the operation, do the calculation on the terminal on the supercomputer, and which is not very convenient for the MATLAB to do it. But if you want to learn, want to solve some problem in the class, or to solve some the computational work in the class, the MATLAB could be a better option, or to do the to plot, to do the work. Another reason is that the Python offer the free license. So that is the biggest advantage. So you do not worry about whether I can still use it or not, because it's free. And there are many free samples or tutorials online. So that is the advantage. But compared to the Python MATLAB is it's good to study the fundamental science. Or in your other class, for example, you studied the math or studied to do some simple calculation. The MATLAB is definitely it's easier to use. So the Python is free, it's free, and but it requires sometimes it requires more work to do. Even we replace the MATLAB with a Python, but I still think this 10 weeks or it's still not enough. You will not have enough time to gain that skills as well. So, So what I suggest is that once you know these skills, you try to use it in other class. So no matter it's about the plotting or do the calculation, try to solve it, to think about it from the programming thinking, then you will find it useful. And once you know it well, it's super easy to transfer to another language. And I think we are in the department level, we are still discussing the trying to offer the Python class for the MATLAB to replace the MATLAB or to add another class, but I think it's still not determined yet.
Thank you, Professor Yang. Does anyone else have any comment on this? If not, I think the time allocated for this section is up. So we'll be moving to an open floor. And in the open floor, you can ask any question. Both this is open to both faculty and students. Faculty, if you want to ask students anything, feel free to do so. If students, if you want to ask faculty anything, also feel free to do so. And you can ask about anything regarding nanoengineering or chemical engineering. Does anyone else have any questions? Or else we can wrap up the town hall a bit early. Oh, Ryan, you have a question.
So I guess like this kind of dead air reminded me of a question. So one of the issues I've had with Zoom classes is that it doesn't really seem, how should students feel more comfortable with asking questions in class? Because I noticed that is a trend with a lot of courses I've been taking when they're live, that students don't feel comfortable either raising their hands or speaking in front of a group, because speaking over Zoom is essentially not just raising your hand in a crowd, it's walking in front of the class, your name is up there and everyone can see who you are and who's asking the question. So I guess, are there any methods professors recommend where students feel more comfortable asking these questions? So I guess some place to ask anonymously or some of those lines.
Does anyone professors want to respond to that? Professor Drews?
Sure, I guess, could I just clarify what you're asking is the general idea of your question, what's the best way to ask a question during a Zoom lecture?
Yeah, I guess it's more of a general trend I've noticed with classes where, is there any thought to potentially give students a more comfortable atmosphere to asking questions? Because I've noticed there are significantly less questions asked in class over online courses rather than in person. So are there any thoughts? Because I know like one of the classes I had, they have a Google form at the end of the week that says, okay, after looking at these lectures, do you have any questions that you want answered along those lines? So has the Nano department considered using that method at all?
I guess I'm not aware of that. I'm only me, so I don't know if those discussions have had or have been made at levels other than what I've been exposed to. I guess the only part I would push back on is the assumption that there are fewer questions now. So right now I'm teaching one class live in person on campus, and then I'm teaching exactly the same the course remotely later on in the afternoon. I get far more questions in the remote portion through the chat feature. So maybe it's just a difference in the way that different faculty use Zoom. I feel like it may be because students are more comfortable sending not anonymous questions, but private questions, right? You don't have to ask your question in front of the entire class. You can ask directly to the professor. So I find I get far more questions in my Zoom course than I do in the live lecture course. The ways that may be encouraged by faculty would change from class to class. So I encourage people to post questions in chat, kind of like Twitch stream would have. And I sort of go through some material and then I pause and then I look over at chat and I catch up with any questions. And then I also try to leave time just in the middle of lecture after we go over a bunch of stuff to say, okay, let's wait 2 or 3 minutes for you to catch up. And if you have questions, put them in chat. And then there's another Q&A period after the lecture ends. So I get far more questions on the Zoom side than in the live section.
Thank you, Professor Drews. Okay, so there's actually a question in chat. For students with no time to get into research due to classwork as well as an internship year-round, how do you suggest we get into research without having to pick between the internship and research? So actually, Tyler replied to this. There is an option to take an independent research course as part of your curriculum. You can take 2 Nano 199 courses and or Sench 199 courses and petition them to use for elective requirements. Does any other professors want to add on to this question?
Serena, so for students doing research, usually it's in the school year time, right? I mean quarters. So for summer, you go to intern. That's the typical way. I don't think you have time to do research, to internship, and then take the class at the same time. Because you really cannot split yourself 3 ways. But a 199 course, yes, it's useful. It will add to your credit, yeah, but you need to have a lab to support that, right? You need to get into the lab and have some sort of project working with the graduate students. Then you count that towards the 199 credit. I do have a student doing that. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Chen. Does anyone else have questions? You can also put it in the chat. Like I'll read them out, or you can private message me or Victor, and we can also read it out for you if you would like. Emily?
Yeah, just a really quick question, because I feel like we've kind of heard what the student concerns with transitioning back to in-person is. But are there any concerns that the professors have with transitioning back to in-person teaching?
Okay, to answer that question, actually, I do not have. I'm eager to return to teach. I'm already get very tired of staying at home or doing the Zoom teaching. But I will offer the online office hour that will be effective for some students who will not come to the office.
I can add on to that. As part of our job requirement, when the university say, hey, come back, we come back. Okay, not that much option. Unless there's a medical reason, there's some other reason. Otherwise, if the university is open, everybody, every professor, including many staff, are supposed to report on site. So, and like Professor Yang said, we are eager to come back to meet with the students in the classroom. I could use hands and walk around and make jokes. I see response in the Zoom meeting. Even if I make jokes, no one has response. So it's not fun. Yeah, we were eager to go. We are eager to get back to classroom.
Thank you, Professor Chen. Thank you, Professor Yang. Does anyone want to respond to Emily's question, or does anyone have any other further questions? Just a reminder, you can either raise your hand or you can put it in the chat, and we'll read it out for you. If there aren't any questions in a minute or so, then we'll probably wrap it up. So yeah, I think we've already, okay. So thank you everyone for joining this town hall. So if you would like to join like the NETS Discord or AIChE Discord, these are the QR codes. Also, just to let everyone know, for the professors, we will be compiling the survey responses and the comments that are made, just in case you would like to like refer to them for any future course planning. And I'll pass it over to Carla and Jessica for them to distribute to you. If there aren't any questions, then this would be the end of the town hall. Thank you everyone who attended, and thank you for all the responses and all the interaction. And please fill in the post-event survey if you have time. And do let us, if you have any like feedback on how like the town hall can be improved, just let us know. Are we still recording?
We are still recording.
Okay.
So